South Texas. Father Pat always welcomed me with open arms, and I mean, still, I talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he's very wonderful. And that was kind of my life. But a lot of what would seem humanly failure and rejection, and I met a lot of prejudice. I mean, it starts with like the bishop, and then you've got, the priest saying, you can't be a missionary. You can't be a missionary. You need a husband or a helper. You can't be a missionary, And I was like, that, I don't know where you're coming from. And then, you're in Russia, and so Americans aren't really loved. I remember 9/11 happened when I was there, so I don't remember, everyone's memory here, I barely knew, we didn't have a TV, and all I remember of it was a villager coming up and saying, if those were Russian-made buildings, no airplane would take them down. I was like, oh goodness. He said, I heard it on TV, and I was like, yeah, propaganda, I mean, they still have that there. I kind of moved on to Poland, but they hated the Russians, and I understand. I mean, the Nazis and the Russians destroyed Poland, and the buildings still have bombed out areas from World War II because they stole the Poles' money and sent it to St. Petersburg to make it really beautiful. So I understand it, but I didn't speak Polish, so I could speak English or Russian, and they all know Russian because it was forced in the school, but they would get angry that I wouldn't speak Polish. So that was hard, I went on to Africa, and the religious in Nigeria didn't like me because I didn't do anything, and the bishop I visited used to say, I just want you to pray. It was in an area where Muslims were killing Catholics, and people would say, what's your community? And he would say, well, she's in the Jesus community. That was his answer. Just tell them you're in the Jesus community. And then, I remember him introducing me to the archbishop, the head of the bishops' conference. And he was so excited he found somebody to pray. And the archbishop looked at me and goes, but what do you do? And I said, well, I pray. And I pray a lot. And he goes, everyone prays. What do you really do? I was like, well, and the bishop I was with looked at me kind of embarrassed, and I thought, I don't have an answer, So, you kind of get batted around. You're never quite, but there were great graces in all of these places. And when people ask, where's your favorite place in the world? Every place I've been has a ginormous cross, including America, and a ginormous blessing. The Africans, their joy, their simplicity was incredible. And you wake up every morning and people singing, good morning, Jesus. You know what I mean? You hear them in the streets. And it's awesome. In Russia, the people are brilliant. They fed my intellect. You find these homeless drunk men on the streets, and you ask them how they are, and they're reciting Pushkin. My Russian tutor was like, on the first day, we will start our lessons by reading Lermontov in Russian. He's like a Russian philosopher. That's how I learned. They're all very smart, and they're deep, So everywhere you go, there's a cross and there's a blessing. And I found little by little the answer to my life in this. When I left Russia, I had felt called in a very particular way to a spirituality of littleness, spousal love, and the cross. What I learned was that when you're really little, God does everything, And I got forced once into this car with these mafia guys, and we were looking for an apartment, and the sister I was with was very naive. Okay, and she just was. I mean, she's sweet, but she's very naive. And the church secretary was supposed to arrange things and drop the ball, and we got called by this man, and she's like, he's taking us with his brothers. And I was like, sister, this is not. And she's like, no, come. And I was like, sister, it's a white Mercedes, not his brothers. And she was like, it's so-and-so's husband. And I was like, no, she's 60, he's 25. This is not, And she goes, oh, Mary, you've seen too many mafia. And I thought, I cannot let this sister get in this car alone. So I was like, okay, Hail Mary. We get in the car, and, they're driving us around and making these jokes. And, halfway through the thing, she's like, Mary. And I was like, yes. And she's like, this is the mom. And I was like, now, love, sister. And so I was like, we're fine. Just keep smiling. Tell them thank you. Don't sign any papers. Like, that was our deal. Do not sign anything. And when the priest found out later, he came screaming in the room, what did you sign? What did you sign? Do you know what they could have done to you? I was like, Father, we're fine. But, like, how do you gotta be little. You have to be childlike. And then God gives you grace and a joy and a simplicity, right? You gotta use your mind. You gotta be what? Prudent, they say, but simple. So it's that littleness. Spousal love. We are all called to a marriage with Jesus Christ. And that marriage is consumed on the cross. When he died, what did he say? It is finished. In Latin, it's consummatum est. It is consummated. It is done. And he gave his flesh and his blood and his suffering and his mind and his heart and his soul to be one with us. So that all of the suffering we endure in life, we can find in what he suffered in one way or another on the cross. But it's in order to heal us and have it be resurrected. So ultimately, I was feeling called to the life of crucified love. Being with Jesus, where nobody wants to be with him. But when you really love someone, think of who you love the most. Husband, children, brother, sister, a best friend, whoever it is. And they're suffering. Wouldn't you give your entire life to be with them and to take that on yourself? And that's what Jesus did for us, but that's kind of my response to him. Like, okay, if this will help you somehow, or, makes you happy, bring it on, don't drop me, So it's that littleness, the spousal love, and the cross. So then I came back to our diocese, and I was exhausted, and I wanted to be a hermit, and I went to see Bishop. So I had 3 years as a diocesan hermit. And I continued to live that way for a few years after that, and then basically, the well ran dry, and I needed money. I didn't have the donors that I had before when you're off in the missions. I lived on Divine Providence for 15 years. Every time I needed something, the lady I didn't know at church would come up and say, it sounds funny, but during Mass, our Lord said you needed a ticket to Africa. And I'm like, oh, thank you. It was that kind of stuff that would happen. And so it wasn't happening. And I have a very close priest friend. He's in charge of vocations in the Archdiocese of Chicago. And we were good friends at Notre Dame, and he was actually at the Hermitage for a while when I was there, and then we both ended up downtown Chicago, which is funny because he is like a hermit heart too. And he said, Mary, God is creative. Don't think about it. Like, just let it roll off your back. Why can't you just live your hermit life on Michigan Ave? Padre. But seriously, you're not you've always lived with the poorest of the poor. But God has right now called you. I got a job with triplet newborns, and they live right there off of Michigan Street. So, and I worked 80 hours a week, and it was awful, exhausting. But we got them through the first year of their life. And that's what I did. And I would, Father would just say, Mary, God is creative. Really, just all he's asking is for you to be faithful in your heart. And there's many people who live a beautiful, you don't have to fit necessarily. You fit on the cross. I was like, he's right. And then I ended up coming back here this last year. And, the whole time, my heart is hermit. So, newborns is perfect because it's very contemplative work, and you can pray, and you can sing, and it's quiet, and they like organization. So everything is very organized, and with triplets, we always tended to be a little more laid back with babies, but with triplets, you have to be somewhat organized when you're alone, 15 hours a day. So, everything I would do is 1, 2, 3, 1, and I don't let babies cry. So, you just have to get a nice little rhythm, and we got them organized, and and it was very contemplative. But where do I fit in the church? On the cross. I'm 43, I have the same question. If somebody was tell me about who you are in the the church? And I'm like, I have no idea. If you get this revelation, please let me know. But it doesn't matter. And I think that, I was thinking about phenomenology, but I don't think I have time to talk about that. But, you live a truth in your life to help the world. And the truth that I was asked to live was that truth of radical trust and radical love. And no matter what persecution is thrown at me, no matter what lies are said, no matter what is done, that's not just. This wasn't very just, And sometimes people would say, you just pray all day, is that very productive? Well, when you got your hands crucified, you don't look like you have much of a contribution. You don't look like you're very productive. But you are. Because in Jesus' stillness, he did the greatest act of all eternity, which was redemption. And in Jesus' silence, he spoke the biggest word, right? And so, that's kind of my answer. That's my answer, is love crucified. And I'll tell you, St. John of the Cross says, one act of pure love is worth more in the eyes of God. It is of greater benefit to the soul and for the church, even if it appears to be doing nothing, than are all the works put together. One act of pure love. So when something difficult comes to your life, ask God to turn it into love. I always ask him to make my heart like a furnace, right? Or a fire. Everything you throw into fire gets turned into fire, and then ash, right? Well, I want everything that's thrown at me in life to be turned into love. So, somebody calumniates you, or, somebody rejects you, they ignore you and blow you off. What do? You let your heart bleed. You don't fight it. You just give that to Jesus bleeding on the cross. He gives you strength, right? He makes you one. There's the deepest union you can have with Jesus is crucifixion. All these great mystics and saints in the church, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, they all say the highest form of prayer and union with Christ isn't ecstasy. When you're off in the middle of nowhere and you're up, it's actually crucifixion, suffering. Suffering unites you to your incarnate suffering God, who then, through his wounds, pours out eternal gifts upon you. You don't want to leave Jesus alone. So I've tried to keep my life as hermity as possible, right? God has opened up avenues for mission work again. I've actually recently been invited all over the world, but I'm not physically going anywhere. But I had some key, I don't know if you know Rhonda Shervin, but she's written jillions of books. And she contacted me. I had known her from years before and was interested in helping me get some books that I had written before published. And then the publisher had this radio station, and he's like, can we do interviews? And I was like, sure. And then he's like, we think you have a gift. Will you do a weekly program? And I'm like, it took me a year of praying about it. And then he was like, I'm glad you're finally ready. So we started that. And just communication with people in different ways, right, that need different things. My gift has always been what everybody needs at the moment. If it's hanging out with a prostitute to convert her, okay. If it's working on exorcism teams, I've done it for years. If it's changing a dirty diaper, that's fine. In the orphanage, we'd have 20 babies to me, and that's just kind of where we were. And, Bishop in Nigeria was praying because people were getting slaughtered. So it's just kind of filling in. So now I have that, and then I still have to try to support myself. So I do the nanny thing, and I look for jobs among the affluent who, like my friend in Chicago said, Mary, they need help, and they need God. And then you can make enough in a shorter period of time to actually live your real vocation. My vocation is not to be a nanny. That's another little mission for a period of time in my life, and it works. You know, I have my prayer schedule, and then I go try to do that. But I'll tell you, since I've come back here, it's just been hit and miss. It's been really hard to find a full-time, stable job like you can get in Chicago. In fact, I've looked back there. I don't know what one was, because the needs here are very different. But that's something that I can just do with my eyes shut, children, you know. But like, what is ultimately my vocation? Love. Love. And it's easy. Like, you know, there's a priest that has helped me tremendously that always says, Mary, just love. Now. What? Oh, so that hurts? So they rejected you? Love. Now, every heartbeat. Can you love? You know? And that's truly what each of those heartbeats and each of those breaths of love, of fiat, right? What's fiat? I surrender to you. Let your will be done to me. It's what Our Lady said. It's what Jesus said on the cross, right? It's what he said in Gethsemane. Let your will be done. So every moment you do that, you're just uniting with God. And I guess here at the end, because we're getting very close, Padre Pio. A single act of love made to God during a period of aridity is worth more than 100 made with affection and consolation. So when you go to pray, you can say, oh wow, I wish, I want to have that same love. And you're like, Mary looked so happy and close to Jesus, and I don't feel like that. That's fine. That's right. That's right. Concrete love incarnate isn't going to necessarily be butterflies and rainbows. But one act of love, one fiat, one prayer prayed when you don't want to, one cup of coffee made for your husband when you're tired, one piece of silence instead of retorting back to someone. Each one of those things that are difficult mean more to God than flying away up in the rafters like the saints used to. Seriously, that'll make you sick. And at the very end, Faustina, St. Faustina, Jesus said, a single act of